Hello and welcome to the value of everything. Right, so there has been a tragedy in Zimbabwe. Cecil the lion has been killed in a trophy hunting little session. And we have a little bit of a media uprising. People have been mentioning it to me in the news, so this news has travelled far and wide. And seeing that this news has reached my doorstep and seems quite prevalent, and there's a great big moral philosophic component to it, let's delve in to the ideas and the bases in it. I don't even know if that's a word. So what we have is a very popular lion. In fact, he was meant to be a very friendly lion. He had two prides, which must have mean he was a bit of a catch. All the lionesses must have loved him so much that he had two prides. He led the prides, and he was quite favoured. Apparently, in the national parks, he was a very friendly lion and would approach you and wouldn't show too much aggression. So yeah, we have a very beautiful species which has been met its end in a very unfortunate way. So let's just do a little bit more into the thinking behind this. So apparently this man, can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it doesn't matter too much. He had wanted to hunt a lion. I guess there is a collectible element of getting the lion's hind and like the mouth, so you can have it a rug or you can have it as a wall mount. I think there's something a little bit more beautiful about having an animal live rather than dead, but even so, there is definitely a collectible element to having an animal, which is a trophy of just your abilities and prowess of hunting, how good you are a shot, even though I guess they're not really about great shots, but more about how hard it is to attain something like that animal anyway. I guess like you're collecting Pokemon cards, this is the same sort of thing. You're trying to go through all the species of the animals that you've hunted and killed. Yeah, it's probably very difficult to understand if you've never hunted before, to understand this perspective of killing animals. It's not something that I really would go out of my way to start doing myself, so it's not something that I'm really keen about. But there is definitely a lot of people out there that love going hunting. It's an interesting concept. When I have on my side hunted animals for pests and to eat as well, so vermin, and to kill or just to eat meat, which the eating meat process I think is pretty good. I think it's much more humane for you. Well, I think it's a good concept just for you to kill your own animal and eat it yourself, to understand, if you are going to be a meat eater, how life works in that respect, that life doesn't necessarily come too easy. Nothing is in these little plastic packets, and makes life really easy to do. Oh my gosh, this man's glazing me crazy. Sorry about that, I was just trying to get into some drive. Killing animals I have done myself. I don't know whether that is useful information to you when I pass that on. I will try and deliver a balanced viewpoint as much as I can. I've killed rabbits. Farmers were it was basically the rabbits are destroying the land, making holes. And we lamped them where we shine a light at the rabbit, and they are slightly startled by the lamp that's shone at them, and then you have a shotgun and then you shoot them. And it's a very funny experience. I'm not sure whether I really am down with killing animals. They just flip upside down like it's almost like a Nintendo shooter game. From one side, if you hit the head, it just flips straight over. And then you might just see a little flapping leg still trying to run away. That's a little bit more distressing when you can see that there's this sort of little bit in there that's running off of some kind of, I don't know, last minute adrenaline rush, which is thrusting that foot around, and the nerve system's just still working in the depth of that animal. But we took them back, we ate them. And a lot of the remaining of the vermin, I think they just got fed to the dogs and stuff. But yeah, it's not exactly my idea of immense amount of fun. I think hunting, the approach to the animal is quite interesting, but the murder, the killing element is definitely not something that is relished, but is sort of an interesting element that you could see that the animal dies in front of you. You understand where it comes from, and if you've got the capacity to eat the food afterwards, then there's that element too. So yeah, that's just one of the points of my perspectives. Now, when it comes to the act of killing animals, we will try and apply this as good as possible in this respect. So you'll have one argument which would say fundamentally you have to be universal with the golden rule, do to those as you would do to yourself. If you could think of, would you really want to be put into some kind of farming center where you was only bred for the purposes of your own meat, and then scuttled away into some kind of abattoir where you was electrocuted, and then that will be the remainder of your life? It's probably not the one thing that we would all choose to do ourselves. But then there is quite a large amount of counter arguments to that. For one, we would say if a predator animal, another predator animal, chose that we was quite a nice, tasty species, would it not do that to us? There is the argument of consciousness. So we are the only animals who are conscious beings and aware of our own surroundings. So therefore, we have a higher prevalence in the whole chain of things. If you could, I know this brings it to a bit of a different level, but if you could value everything in this world, a human being has the highest value because it has the highest capacity to change the world, make it a better place, improve things. So there is that element, whereas an animal doesn't necessarily have any ability other than to act on its own instinct. Therefore, there is a hierarchy of animals. There is certain nutritional needs that a human does require. I think there's B vitamins and certain fats which can really only get from being well, I think there are. You can perfectly survive, but being a full vegetarian. There's people out there that exist like that, but there is potential nutrition deficiencies out there. Somebody can back me up on these points, and say if you're recovering from certain injuries, especially muscular injuries, I don't think there's going to be a better alternative than to get on to the protein shakes and the eating your meats. So there is that aspect to meat eating, which definitely needs to be explored further in that realm. But this isn't quite just the pure point of farming for nutrition. This is a different element of killing an animal for the trophy. Now, as I mentioned to you before, I was killing animals for utility to improve the farmland so that we could get a better harvest. And I was killing animals also in the same process to eat as well. So it wasn't a complete waste. So maybe I think there might have been some, if there was any problems with the animals or anything like that, I think maybe some of them would have been discarded. But I can't be 100% sure of all what was happened. Maybe the dogs got to it because I think there's dogs available or there was dogs around in the farm, and I'm sure a good farmer wouldn't have put much to waste. So yeah, trophy hunting. Now, how would you like that done to you? So we are we're talking about something where you're hunted, you're preyed upon, and you're shot. Now, in the whole grand scheme of things, if you've lived a life and you've lived in an environment where you can roam, you can live quite normally in your sort of habitat without too much of a problem with sort of being, say, if you was farmed, you was like being kettled into certain pens and you was stored at different places. Maybe you could argue that they might have better conditions with shelter and warmth. Also, you could argue that they potentially could have worse conditions. But let's say, for example, if you're a trophy hunted animal and you're in some kind of reserve, we would potentially suggest that you're going to live in a slightly better environment as much as you can, a much more, when I say better, a much more natural environment than to say if you was a farmed animal. So we do have two little respects to consider there. So when it comes to the moral aspect of it as well, so there are necessities. So we eat meat for pleasure. It is a pleasurable thing to have. Is our beef burgers and chicken and things like that. Yes, it is a pleasurable thing that we like to do. Also, there is a nutritional element. Now, probably in a lot of people's minds, a lot of people are more instinctual than thinking about their nutrition, so they just tuck their teeth straight into that piece of meat and not necessarily thinking about the actual moral aspects of the animal being killed, and not really thinking about the nutritional aspects of the food that they're eating either. So a lot of killing which is occurring in our normal habitat is happening with just our pleasure at heart. Now, please correct me if if you think that I've got any sort of incorrect statement going on there, but we do seem to kill animals just for a certain amount of pleasure, just in the way that we eat food. So just think of it in that respect. Then when we think about the actual trophy killing, there's not really too much of a difference here. I mean, the pure sense of the problem with trophy hunting is the case that you're just you potentially are doing extreme harm to it, but in a moment. So if you get a bad shot on an animal and it starts to limp off, then you do have a potential where you're increasing the amount of suffering which could happen to that animal in that moment in time. In the example of this lion, which is a pride leader, you potentially do create a certain amount of tragedy in terms of the animal suffering. There's also other animals that might suffer from the loss. There could be certain power struggles which can occur in the vacuum of the alpha animal being removed. So we do have also not just like the murder of Cecil the lion, but we also have other effects which potentially could come to harm, but also could advantage other lions. There could be another lion that could be waiting in the whims that's really wanting to ascend up the breeding chain, and now he's got his opportunity. So we think about that in that respect. But yeah, so we don't know how well this shot was. I can make a presumption, that a fairly well-educated presumption, that maybe he didn't go for the headshot because that would have been a good ornament. So maybe he was going for a heart shot, or just to wound one of the legs. There is that potential there. So where an animal would be just like electrocuted in an abattoir, maybe it'll be forced into that area. It's probably quite a stressful environment for an animal to be ushered into a abattoir. There'll be a sort of slow stress release. For an animal that would be shot, you as you would with a human, you would have an instant adrenaline rush, and there's certain painkiller things which kick in at the same time under the immense amount of pain and stress, that you don't necessarily feel what is happening to you happen straight away. I know it sounds incredible, but you don't necessarily feel immense pain when you're shot straight away. So you feel like I've never been shot myself, so I can't really be really great on this one, but a lot of people explain that you just feel like you've been hit with a bat, or you've been hit really hard, but not necessarily like your leg's been broken or something like that, so by a bullet wound. So just think of it in that respect. Now, it may have been just a very high caliber gun that just shot a massive hole inside the lion as well, so it could have been just something very simple like that and just winded it, took it all out of the animal, and then that was the end of it. So yeah, when we look at the element of the death between an animal that was ushered into an abattoir to an animal that was taken out by a gunshot, then I would lean towards potentially that the death of the gunshot wound would have been slightly more painless death, or less stressful death. Let's go by the stress means, maybe more painful but less stressful than a killing in an abattoir. The abattoir will be very sudden, but the build up to it would have been quite stressful, whereas the death where you're shot, maybe you get the adrenaline rush, they might run away for a bit, then you're bleeding out, and then you die. So, and then there's probably an incredible amount of pain at that moment. So all in all, I mean, you've got a lot of factors to mix in there. There's no real 100% proof as to how the kill happened and how it was done, but in respect, if we're looking at the approach to how we eat our food and how we approach all the other animals, in respect of how a trophy killing is done and the pain and the humanity of it, there isn't too many things to break down between us having a nice bit of roast beef on the Sunday. So so the trophy element aspect. Now, according to the dentist, who is this trophy hunter, he did pay somebody something in the region of about 50,000 to do this hunt, and he thought this was a legitimate purchase, which he was going to. He thought he was getting an exchange of value. He expected that he would get a lion which he could shoot and mount up on his wall and show this to his friends while having a drink and saying, "Look at me! I've gone to this wild country and gone to Zimbabwe and been able to get this lion, take it back, and show off and get the bragging rights." And he's paid for those bragging rights. Whereas the other poachers have potentially, we don't know this 100% for sure, have got him to sort of into an agreement which was false and fraudulent in the respect of him going to this hunt. So yeah, there's. I'm not sure about 100% on the proof of that, but he could potentially have been fraudulently put into that position. So there's an obviously you can't necessarily say this person's an innocent victim, but you just got to just take things into a little bit of account when. Ooh. Sorry about that. I just needed to get over a few lanes. Yeah, we need to take this into account when approaching a very touchy subject, especially on the social media sphere. So people want justice now at this moment because a national treasure, a well-liked animal, has been killed, and there doesn't seem to be any justification for that. And the loss is far greater than what ever has been paid. So when we also approach these things, you've got to just think of how the social media thing works and how people instantly perceive how this animal, totally innocent, a loving lion which never done anything wrong, and people think about their own pets and dogs and stuff and think how could somebody do that to a loving animal, and you got to think of how people will impulsively think about these connections and how bad their lives are and how people can kill things. So you just got to just work out the psychology of people and how they approach this matter and think, okay, this is horrible. This person's done this. He's killed an animal which was an amazing animal as well, and it's an absolutely detestable thing that's occurred. So apparently now there's a big social media uproar about this, and I think people have provided the address of the man, maybe his business or his home address. So he potentially is going to be subject to a certain amount of abuse and maybe even something violent or threatening, which can now occur to him because of the reaction. And I think in this respect, obviously, there needs to be a call for calm and a call for just a little bit more thought on the subject matter, so there can be a good discussion and debate, so that we can find out whether this man is a highly evil person who's shooting things for his own ego and going around, and maybe he was told that this animal was quite precious, then just gone for it anyway. There's a number of little key factors which maybe we might not ever get down to the bottom of, but there is that element. So also another thing with trophy hunting, and the same thing for killing animals or farming animals to be eaten for nutrition and pleasure. There is certain evidence, well, especially evidence that there would never be as many pigs well, I know that we domesticate them and selected breeding them and everything like that, but there would never be as many cow species or bull species as there are. There wouldn't be as many sheep. There wouldn't be anywhere near as in all of these creatures that there would be if we would not be farming them. So, in certain respects, for the species, it's been advantageous that they have been able to provide us with nutrition, and some of the animals actually provide us with clothing and things like that. So even though we destroy these animals at certain points in time in their life, we do breed them, and it's not like we have absolutely wiped them off the face of the earth. It's a very touchy subject, because we are talking about mammals here, which are very familiar to us. They nurture their young. They give milk. There's definitely characters in each one of those animals, so there is an immensely touching subject. Now, there's a very good argument with regards to trophy hunting lions, particularly. I think if you've ever seen Louis Theroux's documentary, there's a lot of South African men which were talking about breeding programs. I remember that was quite interesting, but he did put forward a definite point that they were selecting breeding these animals to get the biggest, strongest animals into place, and the breeding program was actually repopulating an endangered species. So as much as we start to detest trophy hunting and start to view it as an evil way that can decimate a species, there is a certain element to it where people find value in those animals, so much so that they would hand over 50,000 to have the death of that creature occur, and for them to have the head, or for it to be taxidermist. Who knows? So it's not like it's not happened before, where we kill an animal for its own use, and in that way, that species survives in that respect. So I think it's really only just starting to sort of come about, these certain businesses. I know it sounds quite heartless in the respect of saying, right, well, let's just turn it into a money spinner. This species, that we can turn this into money, but there isn't really much of a good reason in terms of keeping that animal in, other than the fact that people, the highest valued item that they can get from that animal is from turning it into a trophy, and that would potentially give a certain amount of stability. Now, obviously there are people that love to see the animal in the wild in its natural state, which I prefer as well. But there's no way that I'm going to be paying 50,000 for a ticket to see a lion. I'll be paying in a far smaller scale than what could be paid by a poacher. So if we are looking at value in return, to see these large national parks where you're doing a safari is going to be a very small conservation sort of return in value compared to an immense amount of money which would be thrown at people. Like, if you could, I'm not sure how you would work it, but to start a breeding program for lions, 50,000 would be immense. It would be a massive kicker, especially if you're looking at somewhere like Africa or Zimbabwe, where that type of money goes a very long way. You are looking at potentially like the saving of the own species. Now, it does sound slightly crazy. It does sound like it almost sounds quite heartless, but if we're looking at the survival of certain species and we want to keep things around, then potentially, again, the farming, the breeding, the selected breeding of that species may be the only way that it can coexist with humans, where we're populating and diminishing their environment. Now, okay, I've just touched on another subject here, which is, why does that give us the right that we should encroach their environment over what is compared to what our environment is? So we have an issue in that terms. Now, again, we come back to the argument of our own intelligence. We are conscious beings. We can turn that land into something more profitable. We can convert that into farmland, crops. We can produce much more goods than what a lion can produce. Fair to say. So again, I'm sure I'm going to get quite a few good comebacks on this, and it's not really something that I'm very, because it's if you're applying universal principles, you've got to be applying universals. You've got to apply universals directly to each argument, and obviously the golden rule. This does blur the golden rule because you're fighting it back with the intelligence aspects and the how much we are more valued and how much more we can produce, and in comparisons to our animal species, our compatriot animal species. So yeah. Now, we live in an environment. People might disagree that this environment's good or bad, but we live in an environment where us as humans, the ones that can produce the most, the ones that produce the most value in this world, sometimes they do it through ill means, which is not that great, but in general, the people that are producing a lot of value to the world are rewarded for it, and they're rewarded in getting plenty of money, which they can afford more land on and they can build on, because in general, if you allocate more resources to those people, they can produce more, and that creates more wealth for everybody else. So it's not like, in the whole grand scheme of things, that we're full communists which provide an even amount of land for each person on this planet and provide a certain sector zone for the lions, a certain zone for the wildebeests. Is not applied in that respect, and there is a competitive aspect and a production and efficiency element to how we use the resources on this earth to the best way and capacity. I need to go over another little subject which will keep us in the realms of being wary of governments. So if we have national parks which are government run, not private parks, then we have certain little issues with that. Now, a government, especially like I guess a government in Zimbabwe, I'm not sure if Mugabe's around anymore or if he's gone. They're not going to be that hot, and they're not going to be that controlled on looking after their national parks, and I'm sure their national parks are humongous. There's no way they're going to be able to keep it secure, keep the borders straight, stopping poachers from getting through, all of those elements which would occur. Now, if there was true land ownership which was occurring in those areas, and there are people that are choosing to have selective breeding programs or having proper national parks, maybe the selective breeding programs and the national parks work together, then you would have a lot more control of the land. The animals that potentially roam on that land could be classed as that person's property, and there will be a lot more protection which would occur to those animals which have been put in jeopardy. So if there was a lot more ownership of those areas, you could say, well, you're going to just cover it up with a load of farmland and then all those animals are wiped out. But if there is a money motive in how that land is kept, then that animal should definitely survive in that respect. Now, I think we're getting into another argument here, in the respect of the profit motive is more important than the actual animal's well-being, and we should always be caring for the profit, putting the animal first before the profit motive. Now, this is where you have a counter argument to that, and if it is so important to you that animal does not get killed, then you would put your money into ensuring to ensure its survival, and purchase more of these land areas and purchase more of, I don't know whether you can foster a line or whatever. I don't know where you do those charity things, but if you really did see that there was a high value in keeping these animals, keeping the environment, and keeping everything else, then you would be channeling your money into that area. And that is the general counter argument, rather than just say, well, everything's profit motive, then you would get rid of it. Then you've got the counter argument of saying, well, if that was so important to you, then why wouldn't you put your money towards it? Then you may have a counter argument back to that to say, well, seeing that these animals, seeing that I'm living in this high tax world, I haven't got much money to spend on myself, let alone other animals. Then why would I do that? I can, let's just say that there's not much money that I've got to spend on myself. Well, then, if that is the case, and you're not spending that money, you find so this does take home, and it probably is going to wind up people. Then you're finding that your own needs and your own wants and your own entertainment is more important than the survival and the charity and the looking after of the habitat of that animal. Because essentially people vote with their money, or vote with the allocation of value, and if you're not voting with that, then that's the choice that you're making. Let me see if I can counter argue that any further. So you might say, well, other people were enjoying their lives. Why do I have to be the only one that looks after these animals and looks after their environment? Why am I the only person, whereas all the other guys, everybody else out there is doing their own thing? Right, okay, so fairly good argument, because well, let me just try and break it down a bit. So if somebody's saying, well, why do I have to do it instead of everybody else, then you still come back to the other counter argument that, well, then it's not as important to you. Is that good enough? I'm not sure. Yeah, come back to me on this this point. It's I'm sure there's a good counter argument to this question, but yeah, as a thought experiment on that subject matter, we do need to sort of think about lifestyles and habitats and how much we want to keep them in this world, and how we channel our money towards the things that we want in the world. Now, I don't think many people on their weekly budgets do actually think of these moral questions and think, right, okay, I want to save the whales, I'm going to start putting towards that charity now, and or Greenpeace, and start putting 10% of their wages to these charities which protect animals' welfare. Now, I'm sure that obviously there are people that do that, and this thing does exist. So we have to expect in that realm that people do want to do charitable things. Now, let's say if we do live in an environment which has the tiniest government possible, or no government, where there is no taxation, and people are far more responsible for their actions and have to think a lot more charitable in the way that they allocate their resources and fund things, then potentially we could find ourselves in the way that we do create these massive parks, massive reserves, private areas, which have good breeding programs that doesn't necessarily have to kill or trophy hunt these animals. Maybe we could find ways that we could not do the trophy hunting, and maybe do it in a virtual reality platform. Maybe we could use good amounts of 3D printing to create the same lion which you can mount on the wall. There's all these number of things that could be applied in the respect of that. So interesting points there as to how we can progress. Yeah, let me just try and think of that environment thing again. I can't think of... Yeah, so I think, again, you could also say that that person who says, why me? Why do I have to do it when everybody else doesn't? Yeah, I know it doesn't sound like the greatest counter-argument, but it says, well, then it's obviously not that important to you. Because you're justifying your actions because everybody else doesn't do them. However, then the responsibility is still on you, whether you made that choice or not, and you're still negating yourself from that. Let me know if that's a fair and valid argument for why should I do it in comparison to everybody else. But I think that's justifiable in a valid argument. Yeah, so... Yeah, now... This animal is dead. There's maybe a little bit of a power struggle now that's going on in the two prides, and there's a little bit of disarray. There is a lot of people out there which can empathise with what has happened, especially to the lion, and totally not see the justification on what that dentist has done. It's an interesting little play that the dentist is a healer as well. So if you just had some, I don't know, the tax man going out there, I don't know if taxmen would really earn that much money, but going out there and shooting, maybe that would be, maybe they probably wouldn't like him a bit more. But it's interesting how a healer, somebody that heals your teeth and gums, and makes it better for the future, is the person that is perpetrating the killing and the trophy killing, which sends a little bit of an interesting dynamic on something where you've got what is perceived to be cruelty and what is perceived to be somebody that's who is working in the healthcare profession. So yeah, a little interesting twist on the news there. Yeah, whenever you, as soon as you press that, type in Cecil the lion or lion trophy in Google, you just get instant pictures of loads of lions as well. You don't necessarily get about the dentist or pictures of him. I definitely do think they appear. So just think in that respect, you're going to get that instant picture of that glorious lion roaming around, and that is going to slightly channel your way of thinking before if you just read a news article of what was happening. So there is a definite visual impulse aspect to that. You're definitely not going to see the lion in its evil light, where it well, it's not saying that it's evil. It's working purely off of instinct, so you can't necessarily put it onto it morals as if it's being evil. But you wouldn't, what we would see as a human to be evil, like killing other animals, like one of the harshest thing that an animal does for its for the survival of its own DNA. is if it comes into a pride and it notices that there's certain lion cubs. Oh, I didn't even think of that. Maybe we might have a bit more killing which occurs, which is a bit more of a bit of a tragedy. Then the first thing that they do is kill all the cubs so that the other lionesses can come into their own fertility again, and for it to breed, and to obviously not for these lionesses to put all their resources and nutrition and milk into the cubs. So we do have that little tragedy which occurs, but also just another thing to mention that this lion is an instinctual being. It's a killing machine. It's the apex predator. So it's not all this fluffy toy which you can cuddle up to in the bed. It's not the Disney movie, that the Lion King, or anything in that respect either. But it does, unfortunately, it does conjure up those ideals straight to the mind, and there is an interesting aspect of that. If I always find this one an interesting thing, nobody has any issue with us killing cockroaches. I don't think there's a big charity out there which tries to keep the species of cockroaches alive or mosquitoes alive, and there's big charitable donations in that. So just think of it in that respect. Lions are like cats. We do like the look of them in their appearances. We do keep them like we have domesticated them on a smaller layer, and they are mammals, so they do look and reflect a little bit more like us than other animals. But because it is more akin to us and more likable to us, we have a lot more of an emotional connection to a lion than what we do to a cockroach. So we're going into the world of appearance and aesthetic. I can't even say the word, but you'll be able to correct me on that anyway. Is that a little bit of an issue here, where we see a beautiful creature, and lions are amazing, beautiful creatures to look at. You look at that, but then if we had some other animal which wasn't that good, it had buck teeth and it just like the sunken eyes, would we really care as much? And the tragedy is that maybe we wouldn't. So then we find ourselves in a situation where are we making these choices and like getting on our moral high horse potentially just because something looks pretty? Now I'm not suggesting that that's definitely the way it is, but just it's a thought experiment in the terms of that. Now you can justifiably say that, okay, well, a cockroach is nowhere near in the league and the mental capacity of a lion, so therefore there is more of a tragedy that is occurring there. However, I think it's well documented that the domesticated pig is a highly intelligent animal as well, and yet we are, I think, well, the majority of people, I know that obviously for certain religious aspects that it doesn't happen, but I know in the Western world, pork ribs are definitely well eaten in this in the Western countries. So pork chops, all the other bacon, everything else, we do tend to enjoy that animal quite a lot. Yet that animal does have a higher state of intelligence than other animals. I'm not sure whether we've determined that it is consciously aware of itself and can improve the environments, but yeah. A couple of those little thought experiments to you. I know this is a real It's a real touchy subject because I've covered the aspects of vegetarians and universals here, and intelligent beings, and I think it does. I think there isn't the best answers to these questions. I don't think there's so much of a clear-cut line in all of these respects. I have to be honest with you. I am a meat eater myself. I go down to the shops, I buy these plastic things, and I don't necessarily sort of account to that animal that has forsaken its life for my nutrition or my pleasure. So there definitely is food for thought there. Sorry, I'm totally stuttering tonight. I'm quite tired. Yeah, so keep the ideas flowing. Keep on exploring the aspects of this media frenzy. It is definitely very interesting, and how we look upon ourselves. And once you unravel a whole load of questioning from this subject, you get into a lot of grey areas. So yeah, I hope obviously it's a bit of a tragedy, but I hope you've enjoyed how we've gone through the ideas there. And yeah, let me know if you've got anything else that you could come back to me on, or put forward any rebuttals to the arguments that I put forward. And we'll speak again soon. Thank you very much.